There is no way for the next 61 days that we're not going to do everything we can to prevent Trump from getting anywhere near the White House. Anywhere. This is the Matt Olson story. It's from Time Magazine. And as she said, he's the former head of the National Counterterrorism Center. And he wrote that ISIS is not the only, he said the whole world, this was written yesterday, or the day before, yesterday. And so I posted it in yesterday's homework. I also reposted it in today's homework so that you could, see it. But I'm going to leave out the first paragraph because the first paragraph is about how we're all going to watch the Commander-in-Chief Forum, which now has happened. And he said, but, Americans aren't going to be the only ones who will be watching. He said, in recent months, ISIS has made clear that it's closely following this election, too. And it's chosen a candidate. Interviews with ISIS members and analysis of social media, including a recent Foreign Affairs article, make it clear ISIS is rooting for Donald Trump. This year, ISIS isn't simply a passive observer of American politics. Since the group's rapid rise in 2014, ISIS has established a far-reaching, sophisticated propaganda machine. Its members rely on social media to shape public opinion, recruit new members, and mobilize followers to carry out attacks. Now, some of them are using those channels to advocate for Trump. So all you trolls out there with your Pepe and your memes and you're on the side of ISIS. Just know that. What does that do for your white supremacy? Means you're not so supreme, are you? Lay off the meth. In August, one ISIS spokesman wrote, quote, "I ask Allah to deliver America to Trump." Another supporter declared, quote, "The facilitation of Trump's arrival in the White House must be a priority for jihadists at any cost." ISIS is working to drum up support for the candidate it has called the perfect enemy. Quote, "That may come as a surprise to some. After all, Trump has spent this election making a series of combative and bellicose comments on terrorism, from his pledge to kill the families of terrorists, his plans to bring back torture of suspected terrorists, and his call to ban all Muslims from entering the United States. But the truth is, Trump's statements and extreme positions aren't just contrary to our values, they play right into the hands of ISIS. Trump's anti-Muslim propaganda and proposals are likely to inspire and radicalize more violent jihadists in the United States and Europe. Specifically, his calls for a ban on Muslims visiting our country and for blanket spying on mosques reinforces ISIS's view that the United States is hostile to all Muslims. As a former ISIS fighter told Foreign Affairs, when Trump says hateful things about Muslims, it proves that jihadists are right to fight against the West because the West is fighting Islam. As a result, his ideas fuel the group's efforts to radicalize and mobilize its followers to take action. In fact, Trump himself has been featured in ISIS propaganda videos following the Brussels attack and the Orlando massacre. Trump's statements also serve to isolate and alienate the same Muslim Americans who must be our partners in this fight because they're often on the front lines against ISIS in its effort to radicalize those who are disaffected or otherwise susceptible to its hateful message. And they are in the best position to recognize the signs of radicalization and to intervene before it's too late. Marginalizing these Americans sows distrust of the government and law enforcement and makes it more difficult to identify and disrupt attacks. See, this is just exactly what happens in places like Chicago. Okay, where you remember, what was his name? Laquan McDonald. That was the guy that spun around in the middle of the road as they were shooting him dead, and he was just, high is what he was, and he ended up dead for being high, which is kind of what happens to you in the Philippines. The Philippines autocrat. He's just taken it. He's made it his job to extrajudicially execute 2,400 people because they do drugs. No trials, no rehab, no nothing, just dead. This is Donald Trump's love of authoritarianism. This is what it will look like here if Donald Trump should ever And where will the Oath Keepers be then? Those lily white supremacist Oath Keepers who vow to never, ever obey an unconstitutional order. You know damn well what side they're on. They're on the side of authoritarians. It's really creepy what Donald Trump is doing here. But ISIS has a preferred candidate, and it is Donald Trump. Isn't that a shocker, Pepe?
Pepe!
Morons they are.
Pepe!